Brilliant. So that's us live. Welcome to Time to Talk. I am Dr. Claire Gilvray from Cognitive Sports Therapy, and I am delighted tonight to be joined by Ashleigh Moolman Pasio, who does not need much of an introduction at all. Ashleigh, do you? You are a pro cyclist, Olympian, a Commonwealth Games athlete, Zwift esports world champion. Thank you so much for joining me. Do you want to tell me a little bit about even this year and how this year has been for you?
Yeah, so I mean, this year has been a really great year in terms of, I've reached a level of my best level of performance, even though, I've been going for 13 years. So this is my 13th season as a pro cyclist. And I really believe that that this continuous sort of growth in strength and even this, next step for me was really a lot to do with Zwift and indoor cycling or esports. So obviously in the COVID lockdown, I was in Spain where there was a really hard lockdown. So I had no other option but to either embrace indoor cycling or not to ride at all. And so I am generally the type of person who, I am a very positive person. I always try and find the positives in everything, and also I'm always quite eager for a challenge, or I'm happy to take on a challenge. So at the time the Olympic Games was still very much happening, and so I decided, well, if I want to still stay on good form, and because it was very different all around the world, some parts of the world they still were riding outdoors. I saw it as a massive disadvantage if I didn't find a way of embracing the virtual world. And at first I didn't enjoy training indoors at all before the COVID pandemic. And it was mostly to do with the fact that I am somewhat of a perfectionist, especially when it comes to training. So I really like to execute, especially interval training, as best as I possibly can, and often even always shooting for even better numbers, or to get my best numbers. And so indoor cycling was a bit frustrating for me, because if you don't do it regularly, it's hard to get the same numbers that you would outdoors, because it's a different training stimulus. It's almost like a kind of a gym workout because of the unnatural resistance. So, when I first got onto Zwift, I was very much aware of this frustration, and I spoke to my coach about it. And so he sort of encouraged me to just drop my watts by 20 or 30 watts for my FTP, to make the numbers more realistic and more achievable. And so that's how we started. And, the first sessions were really tough, and that same frustration surfaced. But I just kept, trying to motivate myself. And of course, Zwift with the social aspect helped, as I opened my mind to it. And then, as time passed and as I spent more and more time on Zwift, I started to make the adaptations that you would if you keep at something. And so then the power numbers started to increase, and I started to be able to get the same numbers that I would outdoors. And then I did some power tests or performance tests for my coach, and I produced really good results. So I was realizing, well, I was actually getting stronger by riding Zwift. And so and then one thing led to the next, and I realized the potential of the virtual world to grow female participation. I started to realize how it creates such a nice sort of safe space for women to challenge themselves and to build confidence, which then they can hopefully take into the real world, whether it's the real world in terms of riding the bike, or whether it's just in terms of the real world in their workspace, to build their confidence to be a better person or a stronger person in general. And then one thing led to the next, and I started my virtual community, Rocacorba Collective. And although I find a really good balance now between training outdoors and indoors, I absolutely love training on Zwift, and especially with the Rocacorba Collective, because it's just so cool being able to come together with like-minded women and to be able to share our experiences, and just to sort of pay it forward to help other women to find their best selves on the bike.
Yeah, because I wasn't really a big fan at all of the indoor cycling, and I find Rocacorba and the team effect is massive, isn't it? It's having other women around you that can inspire you and motivate you, and having a sort of a DS in your ear cheering you, kind of like catch the wheel. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm in the peloton. It feels a bit more real when you've got that kind of community around you. And I think it's amazing what you've created as part of Rocacorba. I mean, do you know how many people you've got as part of that community now? Like, how many?
So we're at 150 members now. Which we're quite happy with and proud of. And I want to, of course, I'd love for it to grow even bigger. But what's really important for me is that it remains, a personal space. Obviously, as it grows bigger, it becomes more and more difficult to know every single person. But just to make sure that we don't ever lose that personal touch. So as it grows, obviously, I would like to have more and more riders on board to be able to lead and DS. And so that there is always a close connection between, the leaders in the community and community members. In time, obviously, it would be great to be able to offer more time slots, so that there's more opportunities for people to join rides, if one slot doesn't suit them, and maybe even to grow to accommodate for different time zones. But for the moment, I mean, it's just been incredible to see, those meaningful interactions that have formed between, the Rocacorba Collective Premier League team, who sort of race on a more serious level with the community teams. And I think that's what makes Zwift really special is the fact that there is racing for anyone, no matter what your level is. And then also the opportunity for people to improve, to go from, I've seen so many of our collective members, improving from the D level to the C level, the C level to the B level. And then also just to see how, through creating those interactions between the sort of pro level of the sport on Zwift and the community level, how I believe, we're growing a female fan base, because then the community members are more inclined to watch the pro racing because they feel that they know the athletes, or they can identify, or they relate, or they like the story. So that's also something, I kind of realized quite early on with women's cycling, is that for women to display an interest in watching women's sport, it's not really about necessarily who, the results always, or the equipment or the power numbers. It's more about being able to relate to the athletes, or feeling like the athletes. And so that's been really, really special for me to see, just to have seen how the collective members, even how they all got behind me when I was racing the Tour de France Femmes, and how special that was for me, and of course, it was a slightly disappointing tour for me. Started off great. I thought I was on track to be at least on the podium. And then I got a gastrointestinal bug, and unfortunately there was just nothing I could do. But then, to not have achieved my goal, but still to have had just so many messages coming from collective members saying they loved watching me, and that they were so inspired by watching me, and just the fact that there is a women's Tour de France, to see the impact that had, made the disappointment that much more bearable, because it just shows that there's so much more to sport than just results or winning. It's a great pathway to inspire people, to become the best version of themselves. And that's kind of, what our goal is at Rocacorba Collective.
I love that. And I don't know whether you can put across a sense of what it's like to be in the peloton as a woman. I mean, I think the men's peloton's really quite cutthroat. Is the female peloton like that as well? Or is there support? Is there competitive support within the peloton for each other? What do you?
No, I think, so what's very different about the women's peloton is that there really is like a deep sort of sense or passion, in the peloton. So most women that are riding in the peloton are there because they love riding, and they have a passion for the sport. And I hope that remains, because a big reason why that obviously is the case at the moment is because, for example, for an athlete like myself, I literally got into pro cycling purely through passion, and it didn't really make sense financially at all in the beginning of my career. But what made it sort of sustainable and what kept me going was the passion I had for it. And I've seen how women's cycling has evolved and grown, and it's really taken massive steps in the 13 years that I've been in the professional peloton. But it's really amazing to see, so it is a lucrative career for many women now. Still far off men, but we're getting, closer and closer. But it's a great environment in the women's peloton. We all are, I wouldn't say, we're all best friends, but we're all very supportive of one another. And there's usually, especially in the beginning of the race, there's good chit chat, people congratulating, like if someone won yesterday or if you had a good ride, the day before, everyone coming up sort of saying, well done, you were super strong, or, that kind of talk. And then, okay, when it gets to the pointy end of the race, then it's a bit more serious and maybe there isn't all this chit chat happening. And it's funny, the competitive side gets switched on and we do our best to get the best result we can. But there's always camaraderie, afterwards, congratulating one another. So it's a really good environment within the women's peloton.
And do you think, is there anything else you've talked about how the collective, I guess, that goes some way and increases the interest, doesn't it, around women's cycling and getting women watching women's cycling? Is there anything else you think that we could be gender gap that there still is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think obviously, the Tour de France Femmes has been really huge to help elevate women's cycling, and it's really is very, very tangible. What the impact that it's had, or very real. So, I mean, to be like totally transparent, to show the impact that it's had. For example, the contract I've signed for next year, it's double what I'm earning this year. So that's a very, very real impact that it's had. And it's something that we've all known for quite some time, that the Tour de France really is the biggest race, cycling event in the world. And it's the one event that most people know about, even if you're not an avid cyclist. And so we've all known for many years that it is so important for the women's peloton to have the opportunity to race this race, to be able to take the steps forward to make it a more viable career, or just to push the sport forward as a whole. So I'm very grateful that I'm still around to actually see, the real impact, and to also to reap the rewards of it. It's been really an awesome experience, because I've been part of the whole, sort of fight or push, to get women's cycling, to move it forward, and then to actually experience it has been really incredible. But yeah, I mean, we just need, we need to have more exposure, and we need to have more people watching, because as you can see, I mean, the biggest takeaway from the Tour de France Femmes is the TV numbers, so the more people who are watching, the more likely it is that the and that it will grow. So yeah, I think that's the big thing for women is that women also watch women's racing. I think that it's also, it needs to be marketed slightly different to draw a female fan base in, but I think that there are some nice initiatives happening, like for example, my Rocacorba Collective community with the Zwift racing, and the fact that Zwift sponsored the Tour de France Femmes. I think that's also been great in terms of getting more women interested in the sport, because Zwift do a lot to sort of champion equality and to really put their money where their mouth is. So I couldn't think of a more appropriate sponsor for the Tour de France Femmes. And I think that's what we need. We need, through virtual cycling, I think there's great opportunity to get more and more women on their bikes, to realize the power of cycling and how awesome it is in terms of just empowerment. I got into cycling later in life, so I wasn't a pro cyclist from a very young age. I first studied chemical engineering, and then found my talent for cycling. So I suppose that's why I also have this massive sort of passion to pay it forward, and to afford other women the empowerment I experienced through cycling. I wasn't always a person who believed in myself or who was very confident at all. And through, my husband, Carl, who believed in me and helped me to develop as a cyclist, I grew in self-confidence, and I've become a way stronger woman, not only physically, but mentally. And that level of empowerment or freedom that I've experienced through that journey has just been so incredible. And so, I really want to pay it forward so more women can experience that form of empowerment through cycling.
So if someone's watching this today and they want to kind of get involved, they can go on the Rocacorba site and they can sign up to the community, can't they? And be part of that community at whatever level they're coming in at. And you also have a beautiful venue sitting there in Rocacorba in Spain, don't you? That people can go and train at, and it just looks stunning, I have to say.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, Girona really is a cycling paradise. We have just such a great variety of quiet country roads. The cars are very respectful of the cyclists. It's very beautiful scenery, great restaurants and food. So there's so many reasons to come to Girona to ride. And then, Rocacorba Cycling is quite a unique property. It's a historical Catalan estate, literally at the base of the Rocacorba climb. So Rocacorba is a climb, for those who are wondering where the name comes from. So we're a little bit outside of Girona, the town itself, closer to Banyoles, which has also a very beautiful lake. But what's great about staying a little bit outside of Girona is that you have immediate access to the quiet roads. So there's no town or city to ride through before you start your ride, but it's very accessible by bike or by car to go and enjoy the city of Girona. And there's just such a great cycling culture in the area. Lots of nice coffee shops to visit or stops along the way. You obviously see plenty of pros out on the roads because a lot of international pros base themselves in Girona. And yes, so we have our website, Rocacorba Cycling, and on the website is also a page for the Rocacorba Collective. So yeah, I mean, it would be great for people to sign up to the collective. It is female centric, women are our main focus, but it's not totally exclusive. Men are also welcome if they'd like. We do have mixed social rides, and our workout rides are also open to both men and women. And then, for example, this November we'll be hosting, it hasn't yet been made official, but it should be out soon, that we'll have a Rocacorba Collective camp at Rocacorba Cycling as well. So, the opportunity for collective members to meet up in real life and to ride at Rocacorba Cycling and in the famous pain cave at Rocacorba Cycling will be an opportunity this November. And it's something we'd obviously like to do more and more of.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me, Ashleigh. I kind of try and keep this to 15 minutes. I could talk to you all night, but I know that you are busy. So thank you so much for joining me. And if anyone's got any questions, I always say at the end, please feel free to ask me, and I can always forward them to Ashleigh. Thank you. And good luck with the rest of your plans and for the rest of the season and for next year. So glad you're not leaving. It's great to hear that you're sticking with racing.
Thank you.